Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording this on October 6th. I want to go over the Middle East and what's been going on lately. I haven't been doing a recording because of the Rosh Hashanah holiday. So now this is my recording. I think the last one I did was October 4th or maybe October 3rd. So I want to go over Al Jazeera. They did a special. It's called Could Israel and Iran Go to War? Over the past couple days or so, there's been strikes by Israel in Lebanon, and there's been communication going back and forth that Israel is going to retaliate from the missile strikes that happened from Iran onto Israel. Before we start, please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. It's important that you subscribe to all my channels. Why? Recently, I received a strike on one of the small channels on YouTube dealing with the Taiwan Strait and how the Japanese naval ship went through the Taiwan Strait. So these strikes do happen. You never know when it's going to occur. And this is the reason why you need to be subscribed to all my channels so you can get the content whenever you want to watch it, instead of YouTube telling you when to watch it. In addition, please follow me on X or GETTR. That way you get the notification that I have posted something new. Because the notifications for some of the videos on YouTube, you don't get informed until actually a day later or a few hours after the premiere. So that does happen to a few people. So please make sure you subscribe to the channels. In addition, please ask your social media network to follow me so I can grow an audience organically. In addition, please, if you could, support my work by donating. You can donate on Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my webpage. So if you go to the-studio-reykjavik.com, the link is in the description of this video. Go to the-studio-reykjavik.com. At the bottom of the homepage, you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel, and that way you're supporting my work. I have thousands of videos for free that I do that are similar to this. I do it on international affairs, on finance, and on health issues, how to improve your health, some science, topics, whatever. But it's important that you follow me so you get a perspective, probably a unique perspective. Now, this part of the video, I'm going to go over Al Jazeera. I might find a video that's small and talk about the oil markets because they're interrelated. What's going on in the Middle East is going to perturb the oil markets. And if oil is elevated, you may see higher prices, but it depends on how long it's elevated. You're not going to see price appreciation on goods and services anytime soon because of oil. The strike on the East Coast has been averted, so we're not going to see price appreciation from that. But my understanding is that there isn't a finalized deal with the strike on the East Coast with the port, the dock workers. So that might rear its head again in January, mid-January or so. So stay tuned to that. So please support my work by donating, by following, by asking your social media to follow me, share the links, and to go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that I have. I have many, many different products, and you can buy the products either in individual way or through an anti-aging box way, right? I curate these anti-aging boxes, so you just pick the box and then you get lots of different types of supplements based on your price point. And I tell you basically what each one does, and you can move, towards that health journey, slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system and improve some, some of your lipid profile, your cardiovascular health, and your bone health, and whatnot. So let me go over one of the anti-aging boxes, and so the beginner's box. Hold on. The beginner's box has the structural nanosilver liquid. Just take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle, 20 seconds or so, swallow it. Neutralizes pathogens and keeps that mucosal barrier and improves your immune system. You also get the C60, your choice of extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. C60 is a very strong antioxidant and soaks up free radicals. That's important to reduce the stress on the cell and to improve the mitochondrial health. When you have improved mitochondrial health, you're going to improve your ATP, your energy, and you're going to have more vibrance. In addition to the anti-aging beginners box, you also get vitamin D3 that allows you to absorb calcium. It's a gene expression cofactor, so it helps with gene processes, cellular processes. In addition, if a cell needs to go into apoptosis, D3 helps that. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the individual products or get the anti-aging beginners box. You get the structural nanosilver liquid, you get the C60, your choice of lipid, and D3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging box, beginners, or the individual items. With that said, I'm going to start playing the video here and comment.
200 ballistic missiles at Israel. Iran warns the US of further action unless Israel's aggression is curbed. The world waits to see what Israel will do next as it continues bombing Gaza and Lebanon. Can peace prevail, or is a wider war more likely? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahwala. Iran fired almost 200 missiles at Israel. A big mistake for which Tehran will pay, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran and the US don't have diplomatic relations, but Iranian sources have told Al Jazeera that a message has been sent to Washington. In it, Iran says the period of what it calls unilateral self-restraint has ended, and that any more Israeli attacks will be met with what it terms an unconventional response, including the targeting of infrastructure. In the message, Iran stressed it does not want a regional war, but says Israel and what it calls its unbridled madness must be curbed. So what's next? Is Netanyahu trying to provoke Iran into war, which would then involve the US and Western allies in a wider conflict? What is Iran's strategy and its military capability? Can a path to peace be found, or are we already on the road to a wider war? We'll speak to our guests in a few moments, but first, this report from Sarah Gill.
Ready for the big meeting?
I have to write this project plan.
I just need to reply to 40 emails.
Every day your team gets sucked into endless writing tasks.
On Tuesday, Iran attacked Israel. Balls of fire lit up the night sky above Tel Aviv. Tehran says it was in response to the assassinations of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh. But Iran has reiterated both indirectly to the US and on an official state visit to Qatar that it does not want a regional war.
We are not in pursuit of war with Israel. They promised us peace, but Israel has terrorized our guests in Tehran during our presidential inauguration. We want to establish peace. If you disagree, peace will not be established.
There are no such calls from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. who's painted Iran as Israel's #1 enemy throughout his entire political career. Just a week ago, he told the UN Iran was building ballistic missiles to threaten the entire world. Tehran denies its nuclear program is for military purposes. Netanyahu also says Israel is ready to attack again.
I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. And that's true of the entire Middle East.
In nearly a year of war in Gaza, the Israeli military has killed more than 41,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children. And in Lebanon, Israeli air raids have displaced more than 1 million people. That's almost 20% of the population in a matter of weeks. The head of the UN says Israel's actions risk engulfing the region in a wider war involving international powers.
The raging fires in the Middle East are fast becoming an inferno. It's high time to stop the sickening cycle of escalation after escalation that is leading the people of the Middle East straight over the cliff.
US and European nations can.
The problem is, for decades, the international community has not solved the problem and has kicked the can down the road. And it's now high tide to deal with this. You know, there's going to be mass destruction to solve the problem. You can't keep kicking the can down the road. And this is why I keep on saying that Hamas, Hezbollah, and the theocratic apparatus and the nuclear capability of Iran needs to be absolutely, completely destroyed. And then you can worry about peace. But until then, it's absolute war. And anything less than that is only kicking the can down the road. So let me
Of Gaza. Thank you.
The raging fires in the Middle East are fast becoming an inferno. It's high time to stop the sickening cycle of escalation after escalation that is leading the people of the Middle East straight over the cliff.
US and European nations continue to supply weapons to Israel, even as they call for a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza. And despite the pleas of the UN, there's no sign of an end to this cycle of intensifying violence. Sarah Gill, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guest from Tehran. We are joined by Mohammed Marandi, a professor of American Studies at the University of Tehran. He was also media advisor to the Iranian negotiating team at the International Atomic Energy Agency in Boston, Virginia. Thomas Pickering, former US ambassador to the United Nations, who was also ambassador to Israel, Jordan, and Russia, among other countries too. In Tel Aviv, Gidi Levy, columnist at the Haaretz newspaper and author of the book, The Punishment of Gaza. Thank you for joining us. Mohammed, what is the general feeling in Tehran? Is it that the Iranians believe they are on the verge of a war with Israel?
It is quite possible. Today, Ayatollah Khamenei led the Friday prayers, and I think this was perhaps the largest gathering of people that I've ever seen in Tehran, even though there were lots of online chatter about the Israeli regime striking the ceremony and the prayers, but we saw millions of people participate, and he was very strong and firm about what Iran will do. If the Israeli regime strikes Iran, if it escalates, Iran will strike much harder next time around. What we saw a few days ago was just the tip of the iceberg. And I think it's wise for people in Washington to yank hard on Netanyahu's leash. Otherwise, the price that the Israeli regime will pay will be much higher than anything it's ever had to pay before.
Thomas, the Iranians are defiant and so are the Israelis. Do you still believe that there is a bigger room for any compromise or a political deal that could implement a ceasefire agreement?
I think that politically speaking, one can envisage compromises. The real problem, and your question is rightly directed at it, is there the will to move now? And this is one of the worst, if not perhaps the worst situation we have seen in the Middle East in a very long while. It has the potential to produce a catastrophe, and that kind of catastrophe will affect people on both sides of any line you seek to draw in the midst of a conflict. And this has been deeply concerning. We are in a complicated situation in the United States with an election about the presidency, which is for us an existential question in many ways, just 30 some days away. Deeply affected by the situation in the Middle East, it is not something that can be easily put aside as having some serious influence both in the Middle East in the long term and in my own country in the immediate and long term.
Gideon, the threats made by Iranian President, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, are they taken seriously by the establishment in Israel?
Yes, absolutely. Nobody can not take them seriously because the situation is very, very serious. But taking seriously does not mean that Israel has second thoughts about striking back Iraq. I say it's unfortunately so, but I don't see any chance that Israel will not retaliate on the attack of Tuesday evening. And if so, we are facing a great, huge regional danger.
Mm-hmm. Mohammed, at this particular moment, can we fairly say that the top priority for Iran now, because you have the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs in Lebanon, is to try to ensure there is a deal to at least make sure that Hezbollah remains intact despite the string of setbacks it suffered over the last few weeks?
Have no doubt that Hezbollah is very powerful and that it is probably more powerful today than it was a couple of weeks ago. And this is not empty words.
That is so BS. Israel has chopped off its command and control. They're in chaos. Will they be able to launch rockets? Yes, but that's because there's asymmetry and a little bit of decentralized command, all right? But when Israel goes into the ground offensive with mechanized machinery, right, not just special ops, it's going to totally radically change the region. Now, during the Rosh Hashanah prayers, you know, a lot of people from Israel come to New York, and they're vacationing in New York during the high holy days. So there was a IDF soldier, all right, in the shul, and he actually got a special blessing by the rabbi and all this. He served in the IDF in Gaza, all right? Now, this is what he said, all right? He's getting redeployed after the High Holy Days to Lebanon. So they're moving in. They're moving in. All right. He's not special ops, but you know, they're moving in as a mechanized force. All right. What Israel's doing is cutting off command and control, create chaos. So it's easier, even though it's going to be hard, but it'll be easier for Israel to come in and take land. They are going to push into Lebanon and take land. And this is what I was saying on October, right when this event happened, on October 8th, when I started covering this stuff. All right. But, you know, because of October 7th, Israel is going to get bigger. That means the West Bank, that means the Northern Front, that means parts of Jordan, that means parts of Iraq and Syria, Lebanon, parts of Egypt. This is going to be a larger Israel in the end. Now, I can't prove it, but I have a hint, I have a feeling, and it's a thought that I have to think more about, but I had this. King David had a personality, all right? He wasn't supposed to be born. Right? I'm going on a tangent here, but trust me on this. You'll get what I'm saying once I tell the whole story. King David was not supposed to be born. He was supposed to be a stillborn, all right? Adam knew all. And he knew that King David, if he was allowed to live, would be able to be the one that sets in motion the building of the temple. All right. Now, Kabbalistically, Moses could not go into the promised land and build the temple because whatever Moses does lasts forever. And it was set that something in Israel has to be destroyed. So if Moses was allowed to go into the promised land and build the temple, the Jewish people would have been destroyed. That's Kabbalistically. Moses knows this. So instead of talking to the rock, he hits the rock. So the Jewish people, through King David and Solomon, his son, ends up building the temple. So the temple can be destroyed and not the Jewish people. All right? Adam knows this. So he gives up 70 years of his life, knowing that Moses was going to hit the rock. And so King David would not be a stillborn. All right? King David's not a stillborn, and eventually he wages war, and Israel becomes more secure, and there's the building of the temple. And the King David basically prepares for the building of the temple, and the actual building of the temple is through Solomon. But there's this big Kabbalistic thing that's going on. King David was supposed to be a stillborn because Moses could have been in the promised land to build the temple. But it wasn't meant to be because something was going to be destroyed in Israel, and it was either the Jewish people or the temple. Now, if Moses built the temple, God would not have destroyed the temple. He would have destroyed the people. All right? Because what Moses builds doesn't get destroyed. All right? So there's this bigger Kabbalistic thing going on here. Of course, this professor is too much of an idiot to understand this. That's why you come to my channel, so I can tell you this stuff. So Adam gives the 70 years of his life to King David to be able to be the king that sets in motion the building of the temple, so the Jewish people can eventually be redeemed. We're going through that whole thousands of year process of being redeemed. To say, this professor here, Mohammed Marandi, to say that Hezbollah is stronger now than through 3 weeks ago, before the pager bomber, I don't think he's paying attention to the news. Israel is killing the command and control to create chaos to allow for a land invasion. And what's going to happen is there's going to be land increase for Israel. Lebanon is going to lose land. That's where this is going. And Iran knows this. Not only does Iran know this, Iran knows that Hezbollah is weaker and that Israel is zeroing in on the actual regime change of the Ayatollah through decapitation. So will Israel be able to decapitate the Ayatollah? I don't know, but they are sure as hell trying. All right. So to say that Hezbollah is stronger now than 3 weeks ago, I don't think he's paying attention. Israel is going to gain land out of this. Listen to the news about what's going on in the West Bank. They're pushing out they're pushing out the Palestinians. It's happening. Now, independent of if you think that's right or wrong, I don't really care. You can logically say that it's right for the Israelis to do this, and you can logically say that it's wrong. Kabbalistically, what has been passed down for thousands of years is that this was going to happen. Independent of if you think it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. It's stated that it's going to happen. So I'm pretty sure that things are going to get a lot worse in the Middle East.
The Israeli regime murdered a few.
Before I go to that, let me do another little commercial. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging advanced box. In the anti-aging advanced box, you get the Max 35. Take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth 20 seconds, and swallow it. C60, your choice of extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil. C60 is a very potent antioxidant and helps to boost up the health of the mitochondria. You get structural nanosilver toothpaste to help neutralize pathogens, whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, maintains a good gum line. You get your choice of deodorant in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, or citrus. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. It's all natural, and it'll help to detoxify your body. It's for males and females. It's a very high quality deodorant. You get vitamin D3 to get cells to go into apoptosis. Vitamin C to help with your skin and your immune system. And you get a great probiotic, a VeggieCat probiotic, where you're improving the health of your gut biome. So that's the anti-aging advanced box. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging advanced box. If you don't want to get the anti-aging advanced box and you just want individual products, you can do that also on my store. So please go to the store, get the individual products or the curated anti-aging boxes. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So let's go back to Mohammed and his great wisdom from the University of Tehran.
Very powerful, and that it is probably more powerful today than it was a couple of weeks ago. And this is not empty words. The Israeli regime murdered a few senior officials, military officials, but there are younger officers and hundreds of thousands of combatants ready. They have thousands of kilometers of tunnels across the south and central Lebanon and even in the north, and all of their strategic assets.
Listen to the news. They're moving forward and they're telling the people to get out way beyond the dividing line from the 1701 resolution. And they're bombing the hell out of Beirut. And if you actually look at what, I have this picture up on X that's the map of Israel under the boundaries of Ezekiel or in Numbers. All right. And it shows those boundaries. Guess what? That boundary goes way into Lebanon.
Are untouched. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a towering figure, but I think what they've done to him has made people more angry and more determined. As you probably know, I went to Beirut the day after the shock and awe airstrikes.
More angry and determined? they're afraid to turn on their TV because they're afraid that the Unit 8200 wired it up for explosives. They're afraid to use electronics. Yeah, they're all, you know, they're all boasting that they're going to win. Yeah, right. Their society is afraid. It's going to get
in the
bad.
south and the east the day before Sayyid Hassan was murdered. And I've been there for a week. The resilience among the resistance and the supporters of the resistance is extraordinary. And the Israeli regime, I think, has miscalculated, but in their right now, or they've been drunk for a few days. But then
you want to really understand. All right, you know, I saw actually an IDF soldier over the holy days, and he's going to be deployed to Lebanon. All right, he's concerned. He's worried because he's not. He knows that he may die, but he also knows that this is an existential situation in the region. It's a do or die situation. Now, if it's a do or die situation, just let the combatants go at it. And whoever wins, wins. I have a feeling, though, that Israel will win. The problem is the international community is afraid. They're afraid to see what's on the other side when you actually get the job done and show the absolute complete failure of the United States being able to get the job done in Iran. I mean, look at what Israel did in a small microcosm with Yemen. The United States couldn't do it, but the Israelis were. Because the United States, it's not that the United States can't, the United States won't. Big difference. He is a spokesperson from academia, how great Lebanon, how great Hezbollah is. Majority of the people in Lebanon don't want Hezbollah. Hezbollah is holding back the secular society. Oh, which, by the way, a big part of Lebanon isn't even Muslim. They're Christian.
I think made them a bit more sober, and the defeats that they've had to witness on the border with Lebanon over the last few days, I think will make them even more sober. But as your guest rightly pointed out, the regime in Tel Aviv is probably going to continue to escalate because this is not about
See, what it is this guy is upset that they lost momentum on the battlefield, Hezbollah. All right, and they also lost momentum with trying to demonize and create more of a wedge within the society of Israel to try to reach a ceasefire agreement. Ceasefire agreement, based on historical data, shows that Hezbollah and Hamas just reconstitutes. Iran gets closer to a nuclear weapon, and we get a bigger problem down the road. That's what history has told us multiple times. It's also what the Rebbe said would happen if you don't get the job done. And it's all being played out based on his warnings that he told Netanyahu personally in the 80s. So we're seeing it all playing out now. So what we need to do is get the job done so we don't have this problem later down the road. It'll be cheaper, less casualties, and the world will, be at a peaceful point in time. But to get there, it's going to have to be war and destruction. But what it is that they're trying to find pseudo-intellectuals like Mohammed here from the University of Tehran to try to convince you that this was just, a one-off, and they're just drunk on this, euphoria of that, that they're winning. You know what it is? God allowed it to happen. God allowed those pagers and walkie-talkies to be a successful operation. Why? Because the whole soul roots are changing. I've done multiple videos on this. With blowing of that shofar during Rosh Hashanah, the spiritual energy is shifted towards Jacob, even if Esau has more spiritual energy at this point in the year, because for the 6 months Esau is strong, the next 6 months Jacob's is strong, and it goes into a cycle. All right, but sometimes depending on different parts of a decade, some soul roots will be stronger or weaker, and so the power imbalance changes depending on which year you are in within a decade. But in general, we're in the months now where Esau is going to be stronger, but because the shofar was blown, that power imbalance is going to be lessened, and it strengthens Jacob. And this is why the pagers and the walkie-talkies were successful to launch a whole new invasion. Now, to say, this is where Scott Ritter gets it wrong. He says, well, they were very unsuccessful in 2006, so it's going to be an absolute disaster for Israel. Well, they didn't have an operation like the pagers and the walkie-talkies. So Scott Ritter basically says, well, that's just a one-off. That's just a special play, in football, and you can't win a game with special plays, or you can't win the whole football season with just special plays. I think he's losing his marbles, because 2006 is not 2024. In addition, I'm telling you, the metaphysics of this, I am not wrong on. All right. The metaphysics is in the favor of Israel. I've been telling you when the metaphysics is in favor of Islam, of Esau, right? But the metaphysics right now is in favor of Jacob, for sure. All right. And because of this momentum, they're trying to spin it, just like Ritter. They're trying to spin it that, oh, it's, they're going to make big mistakes, and there's just hubris. The Rebbe warned that 3 things: not to be fearful, not to be fearful, not to be hubris, and don't listen to the international community. That's what he warned Netanyahu in the 80s. And he said, if you do these things, you'll be okay, and there will be peace. But if you don't do these things, if you are hubris, or if you don't, if you listen to the international community, or if you're fearful, something bad's going to happen, and it's going to get worse, and you're going to have to pick up the mess. Well, guess what? In 1980s, they didn't do what the Rebbe told them to do. And fast forward to 2024, who's in the office when all this crazy crap is happening? Netanyahu. Now, you tell me, what is the odds for that happening? Like almost zero, as just some sort of random thing. This is meant to happen. Now, go back to what I was saying with the soul roots. Some people have different types of soul roots. I personally think, but I need to think about this a little bit more, but my gut feeling is that part of the soul root of Netanyahu, not fully, part of it is the warring side of King David. Netanyahu is going to be successful on this, but Netanyahu will go down. I don't know, either go down in an assassination attempt by the enemies, or through an assassination through his own people, get kicked out, through just normal electoral process, maybe, prosecuted because of the illegality, because King David wasn't lily white, all right? He did bad things, just like how Netanyahu did bad things, all right? So, but there's a part of his soul that is, there's a little bit of King David in there, all right? And it allows him to, as long as he follows the 3 things that the Rebbe told him: don't be fearful, don't listen to the international community, and don't be hubris, Israel will be successful, and there will be larger territory, and that the territory for the Palestinians will be much less in in Israel proper. And the Palestinians are going to have to be absorbed by the other Arab community at large. If the Palestinians were so important, why don't they just bring them in? They don't want them. And Palestine is actually a modern construct by England. All right, so this is not even a biblical issue. This is more of like a World War I, World War II issue. I can't take it.
Netanyahu and the people around him who need to remain in power, and he wants to get the United States involved. Otherwise, he has lost in Gaza, he has lost in Lebanon, on the border with Lebanon, and he's going to lose with Iran, and he's lost in the Red Sea. But the ceasefire conditions that Iran will accept and Hezbollah will accept are the ceasefire conditions that...
Where is he losing? I think he won in Gaza. I mean, it's like, what is this, Baghdad Bob? Israel just basically took out all of the command and control of Hezbollah in like 2 attacks. And he's saying that Israel's losing? Iran is worried about decapitation and regime change? And Israel's losing? No, I'm telling you, what they did was they attacked Israel when it was in its weakest form. There was a lot of internal strife, and that there is a little bit, maybe temporary, but a little bit of a coalition that is developed for further engagement of the enemy in the northern front. And Mohammed from the University of Tehran is scared shitless from that, but wants to put, a smiley face because he knows that there's a momentum that's building up. And it's because Israel isn't afraid, don't be hubris, and don't pay attention to the international community, which was warned by the Ribby in the 1980s, in the 1970s, in the 1960s. And every time Israel capitulated to the international pressure, it lost. It lost the war. It didn't get the job done. Status quo is ending. Now, what that means for the liberal in Israel, in the Middle East, and even in the United States is going to be a rude awakening. Case in point, it's just a microcosm of what I'm saying. Look at all the DEI that's being rejected by corporate America now. Look at the DEI that's being rejected by the colleges now. There's a switch now that's moving that, you know what? We're tired of the ultra-liberalism. And they're not there yet, but it's just starting to become the potential that these ultra-liberals are pariahs. This is part of this whole new beginning. As you destroy Hezbollah, as you destroy Hamas, as you destroy the theocratic regime of Iran, you're resetting the Middle East, but you're also resetting this whole conservatism and ultra-liberalism equilibrium.
Hamas will accept. The Israeli regime has to accept a ceasefire for Gaza that is acceptable to Hamas and the resistance, and other than that, nothing will be accepted.
Thomas, if the Israelis hit back, then the Iranians may retaliate, and then we might end up in this unstoppable cycle of tit for tat. Where does it leave the region?
The actual decapitation of the Ayatollah and the destruction of the nuclear weapons. And then the international community comes in and brings true democracy to the most of the secular population in Iran, which is what Iran wants. Iran doesn't want the Ayatollah, nor does most of the Lebanese want Hezbollah. So really, the more secular parts of these two countries are in line with what Israel is doing.
In a continuation on a broader basis of the kind of carnage and destruction that we have seen over the last year since October 7th in Gaza. It also threatens the totality of world tranquility in a very broad way. Talk is already circulating about the choice of targets in Iran, whether it would be the nuclear facilities, the oil production facilities, or the missile production facilities, or some combination. None of those, in my view, seems to be capable of affecting the increase in deterrence that seems to be regarded as the important focus of these particular issues, without creating a new element of risk of continued cascading attacks and re-attacks, if we can phrase it that way, that lead to out of control situation. And this should be nobody's desire and nobody's analysis in a clear thinking way of how to proceed. We are getting, if not to the edge of the impossible cliff, we are very close.
Gideon, if you look at the timeline, so you have October the 7th attacks, a key defining moment for the Israelis. You have April attacks when the Iranians fired some 300 missiles and drones at Israel after the strike that killed several Iranian generals in Damascus.
This is important. The Kabbalistic side of this is important. He brings up October 7th, strength of Esau, right? Also, that Rosh Hashanah, the shofar couldn't be blown because it was on the Sabbath, okay? So the strength of Esau. April is a strength for Jacob.
The ballistic missiles that targeted Israel. Now, when the Israelis are contemplating their response, what is the key issue for them? Is to cripple Iran or to ensure that whatever they have to do won't result in a massive response from the Iranians that could just drag the region into chaos?
First, I don't think that the Iranians are that strong. Secondly, Israel can't be afraid. It needs to get the job done and do the regime change that needs to take place. The Ayatollah needs to be destroyed. It's basically destroying Shia. It's allowing for the alignment of Ishmael, Jacob, and the positive of Esau, the positive soul root of Esau, to align and create peace and prosperity in the region. But Esau negative, Hamas, Hezbollah, the theocratic regime in Iran needs to be destroyed. And when that happens, you actually see the death of Satan.
I think that Netanyahu and his government sees now a great opportunity after what they perceive as a great success in Gaza and a great success with Hezbollah. Soon, they think that that's the time to solve all the problems, the security problems of Israel once and for all, as they call it.
Yep.
Namely, to crash all the potential enemies of Israel in Lebanon, in Gaza, and in Tehran. And I think that they feel now that that's the opportunity to try their best to do so. And an attack on Iran, on Iran's facilities, might succeed militarily And yes, there is also one eye directed at Washington. How will Washington react? And by and large, the whole scene is so explosive and so dangerous, so explosive that I can't even imagine myself a scenario in which we prevent now a terrible war.
Mohammed, if you look at what's next, particularly when it comes to Iran, do you think that the response of the Israelis will redefine in a way or another Iran's relations with its key allies, particularly Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis, for example, in Yemen? Do you see that being redefined by the highest establishment in Iran?
The relationship will remain.
Please don't skip us, because if you skip us, you're denying us and our family and the chance of visibility for people who...
The relationship will remain as it is, very powerful, and Iran will ensure that Hezbollah wins this war. It will ensure that Yemen defeats the Israelis, and it will ensure that Hamas, Islamic Jihad, are not defeated by the Israeli regime. I don't mean to sound very tough, but I really need everyone to recognize what's happening, your audience. If the Israeli regime strikes Iran, it cannot destroy a nuclear program because that is very well protected. It can cause some damage, but the advisor to the leader said that Iran's nuclear doctrine will change if Iran is threatened in any way with regards to let's say, a nuclear angle. The Israelis cannot destroy Iran's missile program because that is deep underground. It can hit economic targets and do some damage. But Iran has gone through 8 years of war with Saddam Hussein and maximum pressure sanctions. Iran, on the other hand, will strike Israel so hard with thousands of missiles. Iran has hundreds of thousands of missiles. They prepared underground cities across the country for a war with the United States, not with Israel. Israel is a puny regime. And these underground missile and drone cities the Americans cannot destroy them, let alone Israel. Iran will unleash so many missiles at Israel, and it will destroy its infrastructure. It will destroy everything that it has. The regime will not be able to sustain itself after a heavy Iranian attack. So gone are the days where the Iranians show strategic patience, and gone are the days where the West should ridicule Iran. In April, when the Iranians fired 300 old drones, they were sending a message, and the West thought it was from a position of weakness. First of all, Iran was gathering intelligence for a real strike. They sent 300 drones and a few missiles, older missiles, and a few newer missiles to test the defenses and to see what the Americans, because most of the real defense is American, surface air defense. And they spent billions of dollars shooting down the drones, which costed nothing for Iran. But the Iranians gathered all the intelligence that they need. And now the Iranians have shown what they can do. The Americans should be very careful about the next step, because if Israel does this, Iran will hit it hard. And if the Americans this is the point I wanted to get to. If the Americans get involved, the US will be kicked out of Iraq by the Iraqi resistance. US forces in the Persian Gulf will be gone. And those regimes in the Persian Gulf, those family regimes in the Persian Gulf that host American bases, they will be seen as hosting the enemy. That will be the end of the oil
Now
and
you
gas
can
trade.
see. Now you can see on how easy it is that multiple countries in that region start going against Israel and the United States. He just explained the play that Iraq and Iran will do that will lead to Israel, if Israel is successful, lead to a greater Israel, as Mearsheimer would call it, right? Mearsheimer doesn't think that there will be a greater Israel. DrPaulCottrell does, right? And DrPaulCottrell isn't saying his opinion. DrPaulCottrell is saying that's what's written in the text of these ancient books that said that this was going to happen. So, it's like, just pay attention to what the past told the future, what's going to happen. But these scholars don't want to really pay attention to the warnings that are written down for thousands of years. Let me do a commercial here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging deluxe box. In the deluxe box, you get the Max 35, you get the C60, your choice of extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil. It's a very strong antioxidant. Structural nano silver toothpaste. You get the deodorant, your choice of peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, or citrus. It's a dual purpose product that also detoxifies your body. D3 to help get cells to go into apoptosis. Vitamin C to help with your skin and your immune system. A great probiotic in veggie cap form that helps with your gut biome. And resveratrol, which helps to get rid of senescent cells, help with the mitochondrial health. This is also an antioxidant. And then that's the deluxe box. But in the super deluxe box, you also get everything in the deluxe box, but you get, in addition, omega-3, brings down LDL levels, raises up your HDL levels, really important to control the lipid profile, and it keeps those red blood cells from sticking. So omega-3 can help with reducing blood clot formation. Ashwagandha helps to bring down cortisol levels, helps to bring down glucose levels, and it helps to bring down inflammation. Turmeric, antioxidant, and helps to bring down inflammation. And lastly, in the anti-aging super deluxe box, you get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is very important for cellular metabolism, for energy, and it will help. The first 5 B vitamins, B1 through B5, helps with mitochondria and the electron transport chain that helps with the ATP creation. You need lots of ATP so you have energy for proper cellular processes, especially for your neurons. So B complex is very important for neural health. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the anti-aging beginners box, the advanced box, the deluxe box, or the super deluxe box at the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description. And if you don't want to get an anti-aging box, but you want to get a few vitamins or supplements that I offer, you can buy these things individually. You can buy individually the probiotic or any of the items that I talk about, like the turmeric or the toothpaste. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Let's go back to the pseudo-intellectual from University of Tehran.
And that would lead to a global economic collapse.
Thomas, you served as a US ambassador to the United Nations, the institution that has been put together to ensure that the security and diplomatic architecture that prevailed after the Second World War stays. And for this, the Americans have been trying to do their best to contain situations from deteriorating in the Middle East. Except for now, there is a growing sentiment that what is happening now could be perhaps the Americans.
I gotta interrupt. That strategic, world order, infrastructure, one, that was predicated on the petrodollar, and the petrodollar is dying. 2, it also was predicated on this idea of reconstruction of Japan and the reconstruction of Europe after World War II, and then how to transition that rebuilding into the fight against the Soviet Union through the Cold War. Well, the Cold War is basically done, all right? Now, some people say, well, we're in a new Cold War because of the expansion of NATO and all this stuff, all right? But the Cold War ended. The petrodollar is dying. And these regions that needed to be rebuilt after World War II are already rebuilt. So perhaps the structure post-World War II has to be modified. And I think this is a key point, that why do we assume that the World War II structure needs to go into perpetuity? That it doesn't get modified. It does get modified. And we are seeing the birth pains of this process. Now, if the United States wants to be a pacifist, the United States is going to lose. Then the United States is not going to be the hegemonic power that it used to be. If the United States is not fearful and it gets the job done and aligns with itself with Israel and destroys the nuclear capability of Iran, then the hegemonic power of the United States will be secure. And it will be a blessing. But it's up to us. If we're going to be a pacifist, we're going to lose. If we're going to take the risks, not worry about the international community, and get the job done, there'll be a big blessing that takes place. So don't be surprised that if America doesn't do it, doesn't get it done, on how your finances, your life, the country's well-being in the United States will be faltering. Because we the people had a collective, decision to be a pacifist. There are consequences for that.
Is foreign policy failure in the region in decade? Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that we.
Let me show you how we do stuff around here. Actually, my department uses Monday.com, so I'm good. The work management tool? No, that's not for me. Well,
I think that we face on the part of all of us a serious and catastrophic potential for failure. And I've listened with a great deal of attention to what your two other guests have had to say. I do not agree, after 65 years of practice and following of diplomacy, that military force is the answer to diplomatic problems, and that no war ends, whether by force or by negotiation, without political consequences of some serious significance, and that we do need to take into account, as thinkers and analysts, the risks of moving from a bad situation to an incalculably worse situation, and put our heads around that problem and talk about how can we prevent this. We cannot prevent this by asserting that every issue on which we have differences has to be settled in our favor. That doesn't work in diplomacy, but we cannot require that as the beginning event for a process of moving. We do need to establish communications. The UN has shown its weakness by divisions between the great powers and the failure of the Security Council to do what it should do under the Charter, even if in effect that has to be reinforced and backed up by some use of pressure that is serious to get the process moving toward the outcome that has at the beginning certainly a ceasefire. The resolution of the humanitarian catastrophe in Lebanon and in Gaza, a serious effort to treat with all of the difficulties in the region, including the focus on the question of how and in what way can Israel-Palestine issues be resolved. My humble opinion is the least worst solution is a two-state solution, even if everybody can figure out 1,000 ways that it cannot be achieved and will not be worked. And we have to work on the possible, not the magical. But we are in a magical phase, and magic leads us to self-destruction by the wizards of magic, who happen to be ourselves.
Okay, Gideon, among the Israelis, do they, the whole thing about a two-state solution, a peaceful agreement with the key players in the region, does it still resonate among the Israelis, or do you think that now they believe that the Israeli army has to continue expanding its military operations in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, if needs be, to ensure, or at least to create a new political reality on the ground?
The two-state solution is dead long time ago, in my view, but with 700,000 Jewish settlers, it cannot be implemented, and we have to realize it and to think about the alternative. But answering your question, I can tell you that any diplomatic solution, any peace, I mean, the word peace is not mentioned in Israel at all, but the whole diplomatic arrangement, the whole diplomatic solution is totally off the table in the Israeli discourse. Israel is preparing itself to the next war, and the war after the next war. Israel, almost from wall to wall, is supporting the current war, or shall we call it wars, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and God forbid also in Iran. Most of the Israelis, not all of them, support it. Most of them don't believe in any kind of settlement, neither with Hezbollah nor with Hamas, for sure not with Iran. And the only language they know right now is the language of war, of violence. Most of the Israelis feel that after the 7th of October, they have the right to do so and the duty to do so. And that's very, very dangerous, because so many times in the past Israel went to this way, and so many times in the past we missed opportunities and stayed with the same Sparta, with this state that lives on its sword from war to war, preparing itself for the next war and next war until it will break. And that's a real danger. And therefore it is so disappointing to see that after 1 year in Gaza, in which Israel really achieved nothing, we are aiming at Lebanon now, and then maybe to Iran.
Okay.
And then what? And then what? Preparing for the next war, after the next war.
We have less than 2 minutes. So can you give me just a few short answers? I would really appreciate. Mohammed, are the Iranians willing for a deal, even though the deal could be very painful for the people? Very briefly, please.
No, Iran will not accept any deal other than one where the conditions of Hamas and the resistance in Gaza are accepted, and one where the conditions of Hezbollah are accepted. After the crimes by the Israeli regime, the Holocaust in Gaza, the genocidal attacks in Lebanon, it's clear that this regime and ethno-supremacism has absolutely no place in this region. The two-state solution never was real. It is dead. The most extreme Zionists are in the West Bank. And therefore, the only path forward is the dismantling of the Zionist regime, having a Palestinian state where Jews, Christians, and Muslims are equal human beings. There is no master race. There is no superior people. That era in this region is coming to an end, and the declining West cannot stop the will of the people. And many young Jews, fortunately, in the United States and elsewhere, are themselves showing the world that Zionism is not Judaism.
Thomas, we keep talking the whole time about American leverage in the Middle East. Do you still believe there's a leverage here, or do you think that we are into a new mode of the elections, and therefore the Americans will not really be interested in getting themselves dragged into something bigger in the region?
I'm acutely conscious of many who hold the theory of the decline of American influence, and I'm not naive to ignore its impact. I'm also acutely conscious of the fact that the choice of using American influence may have an existential influence on the outcome of our coming election, which for us, but for others perhaps, is not a total irrelevancy. And in one way or another might be the gateway toward the opening of more constructive influence than the pending election has permitted us to exert, despite the fact that many of us have seen change, enough change and advocate change.
Gideon, is Prime Minister Netanyahu in a much better position to pursue aggressive policies when it comes to dealing with Iran, Hezbollah, and other players in the region?
Absolutely, yes. And when the United States is so passive and is not even considering to use the leverage that they have, he feels he is free to continue. I just want to say one word to our Iranian guests. If the one state, it will not be a Palestinian state, it will be a secular democratic state. And really, I suggest let's stop this arrogant discourse, arrogant language. Both parties use it now. Both parties are sure they will win and they are stronger. Let's try a different discourse because this discourse will bring both of us to hell.
All right.
Any state that accepts equal rights for everyone is fine, and that is acceptable to the people of the region. But a superior people, that is the arrogance.
Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Hamad Balandi, Thomas Pickering, Gideon Levy, I really appreciate your insight. Thank you. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com, for further discussion. Go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Insights. So you can also join the conversation on X. I
want to hear this Fox News.
It's more hostages. Tomorrow marks 1 year since Hamas launched its assault against Israel, killing more than 1,000 and taking hundreds more hostages. Now, 1 year later, the war shows no signs of slowing down, with Israel fighting a two-front war against Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north. Senate Armed Services Committee member and combat veteran Joni Ernst joins us now. Senator, thanks for being here. So how do we do two things at once?
Yeah, thank you.
How do we support Israel in that country doing what it needs to do to defend its sovereign borders and its people, while also not drawing us into a larger conflict in the Middle East? How do we do that?
Well, Pete, thank you so much. And this is extremely important because I'm sitting here in Reykjavik, Iowa. It's a beautiful day in the middle of harvest, peace and serenity.
You know what?
And
the thing is, that's the wrong question. This idea of pacifism, you got to get the job done. And the United States has the military capability to destroy the nuclear capability. And if it means putting ground troops there to do it, so be it. Because in the end, it will be safer for America and the world at large. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's stupid. Being a pacifist in the United States, when it comes to Iran, is what got us to this point.
Israel is, half a world away, being torn apart. What can we do? We can continue to support Israel. They have the drive and desire to go after Hezbollah, to make sure that Hamas is decimated. They want to push back on Iran. And I think, again, it's extremely important that we continue to provide them the means to push back against these nefarious entities that exist throughout the Middle East that are backed by Iran. Stability is important. We can also use soft power. We know that during Trump's administration, the Abraham Accords provided that peace and stability in the Middle East. We can return to that once again, but we have to have American leadership that is willing to be involved, to broker peace deals. And that's exactly what President Trump did. He will do again as our next president.
Do you think possibly this specter of conflict with Iran, with Israel, could actually push them further out into the periphery and Israel closer to a peace deal with Saudi Arabia? I mean, we never know how these things are ultimately going to play out. Peace would be what we want. Has Israel opened that door, or excuse me, Iran, with their aggression, opened that door back up?
Yes, Pete, and this is something that Saudi Arabia and Israel have been working on for a number of years, what we call the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I was just recently in the Middle East, my fourth trip since last October 7th, and spoke directly to MBS. And he did state that it wasn't a matter of if this deal happens, but when it happens. Now, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, of course, wants to see peace. They want to see a solution in Israel, but they are determined to normalize those relations with Israel, because once they do that, there will be greater security in that region. All of these Arab partners in the Middle East, those partners with Israel and the Abraham Accords, they all see Iran as the great threat to their prosperity. So they all want to come together. The kingdom wants to be involved in this as well. And I think Iran has pushed them much, much closer to Israel. And we hope that they are successful in getting this deal done with the assistance of the United States of America.
If you're sitting in Israel's position, Senator, do you think now is the time, from their perspective, if you believe that an Iranian bomb is an existential threat to you, that religious fanatics with a nuclear weapon would threaten the very existence of Israel? If you were Israel right now, would you do more to preemptively strike nuclear capabilities, or does that escalate in ways that they don't want?
If I were sitting in a position of power in Israel, yes, it is something that I most certainly would consider. I do think it's important that Israel maintain its right to existence. I just promoted a resolution, introduced it in the United States Senate with the support of all of my Republican colleagues, saying that Israel has the right to exist. Iran is a threat to their right to exist. The door has been thrown wide open by Iran with their backing of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Islamic Palestinian Jihad. You see this, of course, with their direct attacks now, 2 direct attacks in this current administration, which has never, ever happened before in Israel's short lifespan. So we know that they need to be able to push back. Iran has given them plenty of opportunity now to do that. So whether it's striking their oil fields or most certainly going after their nuclear infrastructure, I believe they have every right to do that. And I do believe the United States should enable them however we can, in what means we can, so that Israel will forever remain a nation in safety and security.
Senator, real quick, I just want to bring it back home a little bit too, but with the connection to the region, we at the top of this hour showed 2 tweets that Kamala Harris put out yesterday. One with 157 million for Lebanon and 100 for a highway in North Carolina. How do you react to the frustration people have seeing all that money going overseas, but not enough for our folks here?
Oh, Pete, I hear it every day here in Iowa as well. And I understand the need to secure our own nation. And so I do support other nations when they want to step up, secure their nations. But when we're sending so much humanitarian aid to other nations that we're not able to provide for the humanitarian needs of our own citizens, this is a big issue. Our taxpayers work very, very hard. We need to take care of America first.
Absolutely. Senator Joni Ernst, thank you for your time. Enjoy the harvest.
The reality, the American government doesn't care about the people. The only time where it cares about its people is when they're voting, and it's even questionable then, and when we pay taxes. So they get our tax money, and the national security state uses that tax money for their whole military industrial complex, and to put it overseas to be able, in their theory, in their strategic planning, to bolster up our hegemonic power in the international community. And they don't really care about the American internally. And so this is the reason why there's a negative feedback loop, where the people become, they want to be pacifists. They don't want, they want to just stay local and not think global. Now, in the case of Russia and Ukraine, we should stop arming Ukraine. We should stop the growing of NATO. When it comes to the Middle East, we need to support Israel so we can kill off Hamas, Hezbollah, and the theocratic regime in Iran. And when it comes to China, we need to make sure that we support Taiwan so we don't lose the island chains, so we can maintain international passage through the seas in that region, especially through the 9-dash line. That's what America needs to do. And stop wasting money in areas and start rebuilding our infrastructure. But what happens is that the national security state and this bloated administrative state that we have in the United States, they don't care about the citizens. They only care when we vote and when we pay our taxes. And they don't really care about the real needs of the people. Because they take our taxpayer dollars, so it bolsters up the national security apparatus, especially internationally. That's what's going on. So stop pretending that being a pacifist all the time is a good idea. And start actually getting to the root cause of some of the problems that we have. Some of the problems that we have today is because we're spending our money wrongly and we're letting the administrative state and the national security state to do it. And this national security state kept on kicking the can down the road to preventing us from reaching homeostasis and getting the job done and knocking out Iran. So the national security state is taking our taxpayer dollars and having a bad foreign policy and not willing to take out Iran. We're in this situation because America was afraid. America was afraid to get the job done. All right. Before we go to Al Jazeera, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and I have the anti-aging structural nanosilver box. In that anti-aging box, you get the Max 35, you get the probiotic, VeggieCap, you get your choice of structural nanosilver soap, you get the lozenges either in Manuka honey or elderberry zinc in a 21 count. You get the structural nanosilver gel, which neutralizes pathogens, and the toothpaste, structural nanosilver toothpaste. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging structural nanosilver box, or you can just purchase the individual items if you don't want to purchase an anti-aging box. Please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system, increase your longevity and vitality. All right, let's go to Al Jazeera because they are just a pantheon of balanced journalism.
Consider that Iran is a very big country in the region. Striking that country and changing the balance would have a lot of repercussions across the region and maybe even the world. It would certainly affect the movement of commerce and the movement of oil and the prices of oil and so on. But nonetheless, there is no feeling that Israel needs to exercise any restraint because of that ironclad US support and the fact that it doesn't seem Biden is going to put the brakes on what Netanyahu intends to do.
And that's not how they're reporting to us from our man in Jordan, because Israel has banned Al Jazeera from reporting in the occupied West Bank and in Israel. Iran's Civil Aviation Organization has announced all flights across Iran will be cancelled from 9 p.m. local time until 6 a.m. on Monday. Tawhid Asadi is a writer and specialist in Iranian affairs. He joins us live from Tehran. So are officials giving any indication of why these flights have been cancelled for this specific period?
Well, actually, this is the only statement that we are hearing from the Iranian officials coming from the spokesperson for the Civil Aviation Organization, who said that we will have a 15-hour suspension of flights, which will start in, I think, less than 2 hours in all the airports of the country. We do not know much whether it's going to be sort of offensive or defensive action or simply a measure of precaution. It's going to remain to be seen in the future, but still, we are in a context that
I suspect that if something happens tonight, so Monday AM is still Sunday early, late Sunday night in the United States, or very, late Sunday night. So what we probably will see in Monday morning trading, probably an elevation in oil price. I think it's trading around $74 a barrel WTI.
Surging tensions, there is a possibility of everything, basically in respect of the recent statements by the Israeli officials, including the prime minister of the Israeli regime, who threatened Iran, and added to that was very strong messages that are coming actually on a daily basis from Tehran, that in case they attack, in case they dare to attack, there's going to be a crushing, fast response down the road. For that, I think we have to wait and see. But under this surging tensions, this is a critically important event that should be monitored very closely.
Tawheed, always good to get your analysis on that. Thanks so much. Let's cross over to Gaza now, where hundreds of Palestinians in the north are fleeing once again as Israeli forces begin another ground assault there. Families have been taking whatever belongings they can and leaving on foot. The army claims Hamas is regrouping and rebuilding infrastructure in Jabalia. At least one school was attacked on Sunday. Israeli forces say Hamas fighters were based there. Israel has also continued airstrikes. An UNRWA operations officer was killed in an attack in Jabalia refugee camp. Mu'adh al-Kahlout has more from Jabalia.
Another heavy airstrike just right now near to Kamal Adwan Hospital, which is densely populated area. Casualties is arriving to Kamal Adwan Hospital right now. Here is a little baby right now, as you can clearly see, and there is a woman that's come inside. The situation here in northern Gaza Strip is deteriorating as the Israeli army intensified its bombing against its civilians, killed many people, including women, children, and journalists. So the entire family have been killed by the Israeli army. They organized attacks and killed too many people. More than 20 civilians still under the rubble right now as the Israeli army killed everyone moving in that areas. While I'm talking to you right now, the fighter jets flying at low levels. There's a airstrike right now.
At least 26 Palestinians have been killed in 2 Israeli military attacks in central Gaza. A mosque and a school sheltering displaced Palestinian families were targeted in a strike. Hani Mahmoud reports from the scene of the blast in Deir al-Balah.
A mosque sheltering displaced families in central Gaza was the latest Israeli military target. The pre-dawn attack set the building ablaze within minutes, leaving many within inside to burn, choke, and die. Al-Aqsa Mosque was not the only target in Deir al-Balah. School housing displaced Palestinians was also hit. Nearly 100 wounded people were rushed, taken to a nearby hospital. By morning, the damage was clear. People came looking for missing their loved ones and to collect
I'm
what's
going to go
left.
to France 24 Live.
They said all the residents of Gaza should go to the safe area.
Single Hamas operation. We will wipe out all Hamas. There will not be Hamas anymore. Hezbollah is a different story. We will not have Hamas.
Yeah.
will be left with 6 million people, Palestinians.
Yeah.
What to do with them? The question I ask everyone, okay, we have destroyed Hamas, we killed everyone, we have reached out for Yahya Sinwar, we killed him, no Hamas anymore. Okay, then what? We have with 6 million Palestinians, what do we want to do? Do we want to continue to occupy the territories forever and engage in terrorist confrontations on a daily basis and be condemned by the international community and lose the status, the prestige, the respect that we have entertained in the international community for so many years?
Yeah.
We have to act, and the Palestinians, there are enough Palestinians that understand that there is no alternative but a two-state solution with a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel, non-militarized Palestinian state, which is what we, Mr. El-Kidbo and myself, agreed and published.
But it kind of feels like shouting at the moon that it must right now to the Israeli government, which on the far right of the government talk about, and you'll hear this phrase a lot, escalate to de-escalate. Tell me what you think about what you would like to see the Netanyahu government specifically regarding Iran next. You talked about this barrage. It has been unseen before. The fortuitous nature that only one person appears to have been killed. As one of your successors, Naftali Bennett, said this week, the focus should be on an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. He talks about, which we can see from his tweet on X, this being the moment to reshape the Middle East, this escalation to de-escalate. What do you think?
There is something. Had France been attacked by not an every country from a distance with 200 ballistic missiles, what do you expect France to do? Not to respond, not to relate to it, just to let it go and say, hey, there were no people killed, so we can absorb it somehow. Of course, Israel has to react, and Israel will react, and this is something which is universally accepted in Israel. Question is, what kind of, are we going to go after people and kill innocent people in the center of Tehran or any other city? Absolutely not. I'm totally against it, and I think overwhelming majority of Israelis is against it. We have to act in a manner which will not trigger an expansion of this confrontation, but rather perhaps signal to Iran that it's not worthwhile to attack Israel with ballistic missiles so that we can move forward away from it. But if there would not be any response, I'm afraid that the Iranians will think that we were devastated and that they carry on. By the way, in any event, I don't think that we have to attack the nuclear facilities. I don't know that we can do that. And in any event, I think that this is something that has to be determined by the United States. If the United States will decide that it needs to be done, they will know how to do it and they have the capabilities.
For those listening, and your words matter here as a former Israeli Prime Minister, and thinking about the state of play when it comes to Israel's allies, first of all, the US. Let me ask you the question that back in 2006, during the 34-day war, when you were in command, the kind of conversations you were having with the Americans, the information, the words of wisdom, perhaps, or the encouragement, given that we're not seeing what it appears to be turning a blind eye and falling on deaf ears, any comments from Joe Biden, is that something that would be alien to you back in 2006, that level of dialogue being perhaps ignored?
That's why I must say I have wonderful relations, trust relations with President Bush. George W. Bush was an excellent, absolutely trustworthy, and with Condoleezza Rice, who was your state. Now, throughout the 34 days, even one time with President Bush, he didn't need to send me any message, and he didn't want to talk to me, and we used to talk frequently. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice came a couple of times to visit. She never demanded anything. She never thought that what we were doing was absolutely out of place. I decided from the beginning, from day one, from the first minute, that the Hezbollah started this. By the way, at the end of the war, a couple of weeks later, the Nasrallah, who was targeted a couple of weeks ago by Israel. That time, say, 2 weeks after the war, had he known 1% of Israeli action, he wouldn't have started the whole thing, and he regretted it. Now, but when I was in charge, I tried to focus fighting against Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. We destroyed the section of Beirut, which was gated and was the headquarters of Hezbollah, with all the command positions, with all the launchers and whatever. But we refrained from shooting at civilians, and we made sure before we started to attack the Dahya section of Beirut that all of the residents of this section were outside of it, so that we had a greater degree of security. That's what I believe we are trying to do now. Israel is not after civilians. Israel is after the killers and the murderers. Don't forget, you mentioned, and I heard your correspondent talking about the people in Beirut. 80,000 Israelis in the north are away from their home.
Now, it's important for the people to realize that in 2006, he was the prime minister when Israel went into Lebanon. He is not a forceful individual. He's too worried about the international community to get the job done. If he got the job done in 2006, we would not have had the problem with Hezbollah. But he didn't. And things have changed. And weapons of warfare have changed. AI and drones and just the galvanizing of people post October 7th. The mindset's different. The nuclear capability is different with Iran. He was a failed leader. He didn't get the job done. This is the thing that the Ribby warned people about in the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s. He failed. And so now he's up on international policy to try to, say that, well, we can't have collateral damage. Well, the problem is that Hezbollah has embedded itself within the civilian population, just like how Hamas did in Gaza. In addition, Iran has buried their capability underground. So to be able to destroy it is probably going to take a land invasion. He is part of the reason why the world is up in flames, because he failed.
On a daily basis by Hezbollah, coming from Beirut, coming from Lebanon, against Israel. Hundreds of rockets every day on centers in Israel, including today and yesterday. So somehow,
Which is why I guess you would advocate more clearly, more loudly your peace plan. Why we need to come back to Gaza. I would also like to know what you make of the war of words between the French president here, Emmanuel Macron, and Benjamin Netanyahu in the last few minutes, as we're talking on air. In fact, the Elysee Palace saying that there is no wavering support for Israel. So words of diplomacy, trying to emoliate and smooth over what's been happening. Let's remind those who've just been watching of the events of the past 24 hours. So Emmanuel Macron called for Western allies to halt arms supplies to Israel if weapons shipments are being sent for use in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister responded directly with what he called a message to Macron. This is part of the exchange.
If we are calling for a ceasefire, consistency means not supplying arms for war. Those who provide arms cannot simultaneously call for a ceasefire and continue to supply them.
As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them.
Shame on them. Ehud, what do you make of this geopolitical fallout?
I know it will not make me very popular in some circles in Israel, but I have to say I like President Macron, and I think he is, and I don't think that he is enemy of the state of Israel, and he has manifested it throughout this last year in many occasions. So, personally, I think that it was a mistake to suggest an embargo of weapons, the state of Israel at the time that 200 ballistic, 100 of rockets are shot at us from Lebanon by the Hezbollah. Hamas continues its war, and we need to somehow fight it through. What I think, and I suggest, and by the way, and to say, I don't like the rhetoric of Benjamin Netanyahu. It is well known. I'm not his supporter, to put it mildly. I think that Erdogan is outrageous, and nothing to do with France or with the president of France. We want Netanyahu to go home as soon as possible, and the sooner the better for Israel.
Well, let me quote you, Ehud, on a recent interview you gave a month ago. You said this, you said, what makes a great leader is the ability when the time comes to do the opposite of what you've ever promised to do. This needs to be done now, you say. You went on to say Netanyahu is not Churchill. He's not Roosevelt. He's not even Neville Chamberlain. Tell me what you mean by that. And what do you think Churchill would do now, faced with this situation?
Well, he would have done long ago. Churchill would have prevented the 7th of October. This is the greatest failure of Netanyahu. The greatest failure in the history of the state of Israel. And as some people say, your colleague Tom Friedman at the New York called him the worst leader in the history of Jewish people. He was the prime minister. He flirted with Hamas. He believed that he can buy Hamas with money and physical assistance, and they will somehow acquiesce and they will not attack the state of Israel. This was a major, monumental mistake of judgment by the Prime Minister of Israel, and he can't forgive himself for doing it, so he's blaming the whole world. So this is Netanyahu. He pretends to be Churchill. He's not Churchill. Churchill would have prevented the long before it would actually take place. And the same with Roosevelt. But Bibi Netanyahu, unfortunately, thinks that he is not just Churchill, that he is Churchill and Roosevelt. And I say that he's not even Chamberlain. Well, but what I think is very important, by the way, in this context that we talk, I think that the war in the North can conclude. There can be a compromise. And I was presented it to the French government as well as to the American government, a plan that I have drafted with experts of intelligence and knowledgeable about the history of the region there that can bring an end to this and an agreement of some sort between us and the Lebanese government. And the French government be very active in dealing with it.
That rounds it up. Nice. Well, it also rounds us up back to the beginning, which is the point that you're making, which is this plan is out there. It's a joint plan with former Palestinian Authority foreign minister, and it's one that, as you say, doesn't need to be looked at now. And if it's not, it needs to gain traction. Ehud Olmert, 12th Prime Minister of Israel, really good to hear your insight, your thoughts.
And the one that failed the 2006 invasion of Lebanon. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and improve your skin by taking the anti-aging skin health box. In that box, you get the collagen, which is a big scooper. Collagen helps to improve your dermal layer. It also helps with your bones and your joints. But it has a very good amino acid profile. There's a big scooper. You mix it with water or with your food or even with milk. So you take the collagen each day, take the vitamin C each day. You drink 32 to 64 ounces of filtered water throughout the day. And what that will do is that water, vitamin C, and the collagen will cross-link and create a better dermal layer. In addition, you put the structural nanosilver gel on your skin. You can put it on your skin before you go to bed and then exfoliate in the morning. That way your skin's clear. You'll notice that your skin's tighter. That's the beginner's box. That's the anti-aging skin health beginner's box. Now for the advanced box, you also get resveratrol, which will help to get rid of senescent cells and improve the basal layer of your skin. And C60, which is a very strong antioxidant You can get it either in extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil. C60 is a molecule that'll soak up free radicals, reduce the stress of the cell, and improve the mitochondrial health and boost up your ATP. What that means is that you're improving the basal layer. That basal layer is where your adult stem cells are to rejuvenate new skin cells. All right? So you're improving your basal layer by taking the C60 and the resveratrol. You're improving the topical layer with the structural nanosilver, and you're improving the middle layer of your skin by taking the collagen and the vitamin C and drinking 32 ounces or 64 ounces of water throughout the day. So in the advanced box for the skin health, you get also the resveratrol and the C60, the silver gel, the vitamin C, and the collagen. In the beginner's box, you get the collagen, vitamin C, and the gel. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-aging skin health beginners or advanced box. It works very well. You'll start to notice that you're seeing an improvement with your skin within 1 month cycle. You should be doing this on a daily basis to improve your skin health. If you don't want to buy an anti-aging skin health box and you just want to buy, let's say, just the collagen as an individual item or whatever, you can do that on my store. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen, get the gels, get the C60, get the resveratrol, and get the vitamin C. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Default.
Thank you.
Stay with us here on the program. We'll be back with Worldview coming up in just a few moments.
Gaza, October 6, 2023. A high-security border Israel thought was impossible to pass.
The problem was that we knew the plan. The plan was in our hands, but we were blind from it.
On October 7, Israel falls into horror. For many, warnings were ignored and lives sacrificed.
One thing is clear. The events on the October 7th Shabbat could have been avoided.
While the government refuses to investigate before the end of the conflict, families are fighting for the truth.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
France 24, a different point of view.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
All right. So while France and Al Jazeera are cycling their news, I want to talk about the anti-Fauci box. The anti-Fauci box helps to boost up your immune system. You get the Max 35. You take a teaspoon of the structural nanosilver liquid each day. You get the D3, which helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis because it's a gene expression cofactor. You get the magnesium and zinc to boost up your immune system. And you bring down inflammation by taking the ashwagandha root. This lowers your cortisol levels and also lowers your glucose levels. It helps to bring down that inflammatory response in your cardiovascular system. And the turmeric, which is an antioxidant and brings down inflammation and those pro-cytokines. So the whole idea is to boost up your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-Fauci box. You get this, the Max 35, the D3, the magnesium and zinc, ashwagandha, and the turmeric. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
On the East border, Israel's Prime Minister gives a speech to IDF troops involved in the ground incursion against Hezbollah in Lebanon. It comes as Israeli forces tell more residents in the south to flee as the war expands. Correspondents in Beirut describe more than 30 missile attacks in the capital as the worst night of violent attacks since the conflict began. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israeli troops and tanks are said to be involved in intense fighting in the northern town of Jabalia against Hamas fighters, with the IDF saying the militants that have been hiding in tunnels have attempted to regroup itself there. Residents have been fleeing. As you can see, the Palestinian Civil Defense Agency saying at least 17 people killed in airstrikes on the town. Sunday evening, the eve of the anniversary of the Hamas attacks in Israel, the day that led to more than 1,200 Israelis murdered by militants in border towns and around 250 people taken hostage. Today, Israel is involved in a multi-front conflict. 7 fronts, according to the Prime Minister: Iran and the groups it backs in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, the occupied West Bank, and Gaza too, with more than 40,000 people killed in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Authority. At least half of them, according to the UN, women and children. Tonight, we're going to look at where things stand, what could happen next, and talk of Israeli retaliation on Iran after its ballistic missile attacks on Tuesday. Tonight, Israeli airports, airspace closed from 9 o'clock this evening until tomorrow. Let's start with what's going on in Lebanon. This is military triage at the moment, given so many fronts are going on. Under intense attack from Israel, its fight against Hezbollah, 6 days into a ground offensive. The IDF talking about its success in killing, assassinating more than 400 Hezbollah militant fighters in the south, commanders too. There have been more evacuation orders for residents to leave and save their lives ahead of an expanded incursion. And localized limited attacks, less localized, less limited than they were initially. And the UN describing a terrible humanitarian crisis for the displaced. Beirut, we've been talking a moment ago to Rawat Tahar, our correspondent there, facing the most intense night of bombings. Let's get the latest from Clement One.
Plumes of smoke over Beirut after the Lebanese capital was hit by the heaviest bombing campaign yet since the beginning of Israel's offensive. Those displaced try to find shelter wherever they can.
The amount of destruction we see shows that there might be no safe spaces, even here, in the street by the Corniche. It might not be safe as well in the coming days. All the buildings are gone and destroyed in the Reykjavik neighborhood. We no longer have homes.
There are strikes every night. It's impossible to sleep. We came here and we're unable to go back home.
Overnight, Israel pounded Lebanon with missiles, killing dozens and creating fireballs which illuminated the sky. The Israeli onslaught on Lebanon has put significant stress on hospitals and healthcare workers. At least 4 hospitals in the south of the country and in the southern suburbs of Beirut have had to suspend their activities on Friday, and 11 rescue workers were killed by the strikes.
It's blast injuries, kids, families whose houses have been targeted, kids with blast injuries to the face, to the torso, amputated limbs. There's over 2,000 children who have been wounded so far. And so that's the kind of work that we've been doing.
According to the Lebanese authorities, since the beginning of the Israeli incursions into Lebanon on September 30th, more than 2,000 people have been killed, over 3,000 injured, and 1.2 million forced out of their homes.
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu has been on the border between Israel and Lebanon in the past few hours. He's been speaking to troops. He's spoken of his vowed victory. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
A year ago, we suffered a terrible blow. The past 12 months, we are changing reality from end to end. The whole world laughs at the blows you inflict on our enemies, and I salute you and tell you, you are the generation of victory. Together, we will fight, and together, we will win.
So we have Benjamin Netanyahu on the northern border with Lebanon. Meanwhile, the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visiting the Negev Desert, the air base in Faz, the Israeli base struck by Iranian missiles on Tuesday. Now, Gallant had said there's no aircraft damaged in the attack. He also talked about no Air Force problems, saying that they can still operate at the base and its operations haven't been damaged. Now, what could Israel be planning next? This is what he had to say.
The Iranians haven't seen the capabilities of the Air Force yet. There's no squadron which was hit, there's no jet that was hit, and there is no runway which cannot allow departure. And there has been no disruption in our operations. Those who think that attempting to strike Israel would deter us from responding should look at what's happening in Gaza and Beirut.
All right, let's get some context and analysis from Doug Herbert, ITIS Affairs commentator. Great to see you. So let's just first, there are many areas we can look at. Let's first just, very interesting listening to the former Israeli Prime Minister a moment ago, and he was quite clear on his view of Netanyahu, on President Macron, on the situation with Iran.
No love lost between Ehud Olmert, the 12th Prime Minister of Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu. It was a fascinating exchange, your interview with him. I was watching it very attentively, and one of the things that struck me, one of his remarks, was he said, the greatest failure in the history of the state of Israel was Benjamin Netanyahu's failure to prevent October 7th. The Hamas attacks, and tracing the roots of it that he sort of flirted with.
Yeah, but what about the failure of the prime minister in 2006 in Lebanon? If he won, we wouldn't be in this situation. Amazing. I mean, just the industrial name.
With Hamas preceding that, while not ever acknowledging that after the fact. And this is something that really weighs on a lot of Israeli society today, almost on the eve of that 1 year anniversary, Gavin. We talk about sort of like we take a step back and say, where is the world? Where is Israel? Where's the region? A large majority, if not the vast majority of the Israeli population, not just those who have lost loved ones, whose families are still, whose family members are still being held hostage in Gaza. There are about 100 estimated still there. A lot of them still put the onus of the blame on Benjamin Netanyahu for failing to bring those hostages back, but also for being reckless, in a sense, in the way he has gone about this war, and never really owning up to, as they see it, his responsibility for the chain of events that led to October 7th. Now, these are the very same people who, at the same time, in an Israeli society which very much is on board with this war, with, as they see it, they're traumatized by October 7th, you could say understandably so. A society that, if it's not outright bellicose, very much on board with the message they need to go after their enemies. So the paradox here, as they put a lot of blame and finger pointing and resentment and even anger at Prime Minister Netanyahu and his right-wing government in their conduct of this war and letting the chain of events that led up to it, for allowing it to happen, they at the same time, and this is where the paradox is, do support that war going forward. So the two might seem mutually exclusive, but you're absolutely right. Multiple fronts is really the way to qualify it, and also a sense of despair at no end in sight, in the sense that we are in an escalatory phase. The phrase being used by the Israeli military with respect to Gaza, the mass evacuation orders there, the heavy bombings that we're seeing in parts of central Gaza, the bombing of a mosque in the past 24 hours there, the evacuation of northern Gaza, the surrounding of the Jabalia refugee camp there. All of this right now is just one of many fronts in a ramping up of this war, of this campaign. Same heavy bombing tactics right now. We heard Rawad, our correspondent in Beirut earlier, talking about it's not just about southern Lebanon anymore. This is very much all of Lebanon is essentially fair game. Heavy bombing, mass evacuation orders. And, we were talking earlier, I asked you, could you name those 7 fronts? And you knew them. We all know those 7 fronts right now, right? It's not just Hezbollah. It's not just Hamas. It's the Houthis in Yemen. It's a Ramback Iraqi militia as well. Syria, the West Bank as terrorists, as Israel sees them. And this is where you look around.
This is playing right into what I was saying. It's going to be a multi-front war where Israel, if victorious, is going to have a larger border system. And it's going to be going back to the biblical times, biblical border system. It's based on Numbers or Ezekiel, so it depends on your, interpretation of what exactly the borders are. But it's roughly what's within Numbers. So the book of Numbers. So I just trust me, this is what's going on. The metaphysics is aligned for this to happen. Now, what I don't understand, because Dr. Paul Cottrell doesn't know everything, but I know a lot. All right, but I don't know everything. I don't understand why the red heifers haven't been sacrificed yet, assuming they haven't been. So that part of the puzzle I don't understand.
Corner. So you could say we're back to square one in a sense on the eve of this anniversary, in the sense that once again Gaza's ratcheting up. The war never went away there. It's been raging all the time. Ratcheting up though again in earnest at the very moment when all of these other fires are popping up across the Middle East. And that's what Israelis are seeing as they look around on this eve. They're not really allowed to fully grieve because they're still taking the hits.
You and I were on the day at this time last year, or the eve of, we were both on the 7th on Saturday, and I think nobody could comprehend the scale of where this was leading, the scale of the massacre, what would come next. You talk about now from there that more than 40,000 people dead in Lebanon, more than 2,000, in Gaza, more than 2,000 in Lebanon in that time. Hostages still in Gaza right now as well. And while we're talking on there are protests. Well,
and it's important to realize that the Ridley was talking about the 7 fronts and ignoring the international community and not being fearful and don't have hubris to be victorious. He was talking about the 7 fronts in the 1980s. Right? And he told that to Netanyahu. Now, you tell me, you really think that Netanyahu's going to lose? Do you really think that this is all just some sort of, Israeli, very short euphoria and that they're going to lose on the battlefield? This thing was discussed in the 80s and warned what not to do and what to do. And every single fucking time that there was some sort of flare-up in the Middle East, Israel placated to either fear or the international pressure. And every single time they lost. Israel can't lose. Because if they placate, I think what's going to happen, which there's 2 possibilities. The one I think is going to happen versus the one that possibly could happen. All right, but with lower probability. Netanyahu wins. All right, but will fall as a leader afterwards. He will win the wars and the 7 fronts, and Israel borders will increase. And it's going to be very bloody, and there's going to be a lot of destruction. And there's going to be a lot of international turmoil. And it's going to hurt American power because we were afraid. All right. But Netanyahu will win, but will be pushed out of power. So this is the reason why he's got that part of that soul root of King David, all right, of war. But because he's a flawed person, he's also going to fall. How he falls, I don't know. Maybe he falls through death. Maybe he falls through some sort of prosecution or just being thrown out of office. I'm not sure. But he falls. That's what I think is going to happen. Another possibility, which is a smaller probability, is that Netanyahu loses. All right. And that Israel will lose power, lose international prestige, and will economically be in hardship because of inflationary pressure because of the war effort. Netanyahu gets pushed out, and Israel will be cursed for a very long time for not getting the job done. Let's see.
It's been protests today in New York and in Mexico City, but actually there are also commemoration moments. There are gatherings.
By the way, if that smaller probability where they lose, that means that Iran goes nuclear, which changes the dynamic of the region and America's hegemonic power. So Israel falling and getting cursed is also the United States curse that happens. But I think that side is low probability. I would say about 20%. I see that there's about an 70 to 80% chance that Netanyahu wins this seven-front war. As long as he's not fearful, he doesn't listen to the international community, and he doesn't boast.
Tel Aviv, we can summon in London at Hyde Park, we've also here in Paris by the UNESCO building, and also in Berlin as well. So we're talking about, bring you some of those images from those moments of marking the anniversary. Doug, my thought to you is there are some voices in Israel right now that believe, opposing Netanyahu, that by going into Lebanon, he's forgotten, he's dismissed the hostages.
Absolutely. Look, Israel's logic, its justification for going into Lebanon is it has made a military objective of being able to return those estimated 60,000 Israeli civilians who've been essentially displaced from their homes for the past year because they live in those northern sectors of Israel, which have been almost in the line of fire directly of incoming Hezbollah rockets. So the goal of this military campaign being to create the conditions, i.e. pushing Hezbollah back, wiping out their munitions, their weapons depots, in order to allow the return of those displaced residents. But by the same motive, there are a lot in Israeli society who fear the consequences of that. They're still very fresh memories of the consequences of what was, even if everyone doesn't explicitly acknowledge it as such, a humiliating almost defeat and withdrawal from Lebanon in the 2006 at the end of the 34-day back in 2006, and right now there's a sense of is history going to repeat itself? I think a lot of people are very much dreading the prospect of a cycle that they will be unable, once they start, to be able to stop. So tonight, as you look at these protests across the world, the question is, can anyone bring any influence or sway to bear on all the sides of this conflict, whether it's Netanyahu, but he seems to not be taking board advice, especially from the US, especially from the United Nations, especially from the United Kingdom, taking board advice from them to sort of reel in the forces there and to try to take a step back from everything. And by the same token, right now there's a sense
Netanyahu is remembering that conversation that he had with the Rebbe in the 1980s. And he's taken the Rebbe's advice. And the international community is going to hate it. But it doesn't matter, because if he follows what the Rebbe said, it's going to work. 100%. The question is, does Netanyahu follow the advice? That's the big question in the sky. Let me plug another anti-Fauci box. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-Fauci advanced box. In the advanced box, you get the Max 35, magnesium and zinc to help to boost up your immune system. You get the ashwagandha and the turmeric, bring down inflammation, and control your blood glucose levels. D3 to get cells to go into apoptosis that have been infected. And in the advanced box, you get your choice of extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, or MCT coconut oil, avocado oil. Let me rephrase that. Extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. C60 has to be in an oil because it's lipid soluble. C60 is a molecule. It's a 60 carbon molecule that soaks up free radicals. It's very potent. It works very well. It brings down those free radicals. It reduces the stress on the cell, improves the tissue health, improves the organ health, and it'll improve your mitochondrial health. The mitochondria is the little mechanism within your cells that brings up the ATP. That's the energy factory. All right. You need ATP to improve your immune system, to improve your cell's health and its function. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, to get the anti-Fauci advanced box. Now, in the deluxe box, the anti-Fauci deluxe box, you get everything that I just mentioned, but you also get digestive enzyme complex, which helps to break down proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, especially glycoproteins, which is very important in the post-2020 crisis. And it has bromelain in it, and that will help to break up clots. It's fibrinolytic. So this helps to break up clots and breaks up glycoproteins. So this is really important. That's why it's in the anti-pouchy box. Omega-3 brings down LDL levels and increases your HDL levels. That means that you have a better lipid profile and helps to control your cholesterol. It also prevents red blood cells from sticking. So it prevents clotting or hyperclotting. And lignans, it's an antioxidant and it brings down inflammation. This is great to boost up your immune system. You need to boost up your immune system. Trust me. Most people's immune systems have been trashed because of the 2020 crisis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-Fauci deluxe box. If you don't want to get a box, but you want some of the items in the box, you can purchase any item individually. It's up to you. You do get a discount if you buy an anti-aging box. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the anti-Fauci box, the anti-Fauci advanced box, or the anti-Fauci deluxe box. Please click the link in the description of this video to get to the store. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com.
With Hezbollah, Iran, all of them are also in a posture where they're braced for an Israeli attack, and they say if we're attacked, we're going to have to hit back even harder. You know, they said that there was even perhaps there are reports now coming forward that the Hezbollah, the late Hezbollah leader now, Hassan Nasrallah, was ready to accept a ceasefire. But he was killed in an Israeli strike, so that's not going to happen.
Two thoughts, because we are getting a lot of information, as we have every night for the past few nights, as we're on air, because of the scale of this now, these multi-fronts. First of all, we've had comments as we're talking from Emmanuel Macron's office to say that they are unwavering in their support for Benjamin Netanyahu and the government, despite their clear fissures between them as to whether they see the view of the conflict. He's still calling for a ceasefire, so they're not seeing eye to eye. I also want to bring this to you. This is from news agencies in the past few minutes while we're on air, to do with Iran, saying this. Senior intelligence, military and diplomatic officials have been meeting in Iran, a special national security foreign ministry committee related to what's the situation and related to the closure of the airspace tonight. Now, clearly it's a leap to take it to what could happen tonight, but this is unusual that they're meeting on a Sunday in Tehran.
Absolutely. Look, all of the Iranian top leadership right now, they are feeling they're torn. They're feeling extremely vulnerable. Everyone is braced for a target. It's just a question of what the Israelis are going to hit, not if they're going to hit. We've heard varying signals sent out in recent days. The U.S. Inveighing on Israel not to hit the nuclear facilities, the Biden administration, and then also suggesting that they shouldn't go after the oil facilities as well. But equally, we've heard the determination of Benjamin Netanyahu and his leadership, and we saw the sound bites from the defense minister earlier with his troops, that determination that they are not going to have the terms of their war as they see it be dictated to them by people who do not live in their neighborhood, and the implication being they cannot understand the threat that we face in the way that we can. So this is a war that they are waging right now. They're essentially, I won't say going rogue, but they're waging it alone. They're going it alone, and if they're not completely turning a deaf ear to the pleas of the international community to take a step back, to try to see things in a broader perspective, there is no signal that they are open to anything else. In Iran right now, those airports being closed, it shows that yes, they are literally on a war footing. They are braced for some sort of retaliation, a retaliation which, as we said, will put them in an almost impossible position, because the pressures on so many levels will be that they have no choice but to respond again in kind. Hence that cycle that we've been talking about, that how do you stop it once it is unleashed?
No.
Briefly, let me get your read of
this
this.
is the wrong focus. Stop worrying about trying to de-escalate it. Try to solve the long-term problem. This is where the international community has screwed up through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s, through the 2010s, and now 2020s. The international community has fucked up every single fucking time. It's time to get the job done. Don't worry about de-escalation. Get the fucking job done. It's really simple. But you got a lot of talking heads and a lot of people that want to be pacifists or or, don't really want to focus on the real problem. Do you really want a nuclear Iran? You think a nuclear Iran is going to make the world a safer place? Good luck with that between the strife between the Sunnis and the Shias. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. Why? It's a dual purpose product. It helps to improve your immune system and your cardiovascular system. How? It brings down inflammation. And by bringing down inflammation, you can boost up your immune system and improve your cardiovascular health, because lower inflammation will reduce the buildup of plaque. In addition, olive leaf extract brings down LDL levels and increases your HDL levels. That means you have a better lipid profile. Better lipid profile means that you are reducing the chances of plaque buildup. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. We need to take a probiotic every day. And I talked earlier in this broadcast about the Veggie Cat probiotic that I have. But I also have a powder form that I take. I mix it with my food in the afternoon every day. It has a little scooper. You just scoop it, put it in your food. You can also just use water, put it in the water, and you take it every day, and it improves your gut biome. That's important for better absorption, better metabolism. It also helps with the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic. And lastly, people need to make sure that they get into 3 cycles of REM sleep. Why? Because that allow you to be well rested when you wake up in the morning, but it also, through deep sleep and REM cycle, you are detoxifying your body, especially the central nervous system. That's important. All right. You also need to consolidate memory, and that consolidation of memory happens with good sleep. Go to my store, take the Good Night Formula to improve your sleep. Take it every day so you have that deep sleep, that 3 cycles of REM sleep. You're detoxifying your body, and you're well rested in the morning. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to early dementia onset. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula.
Neil Macron, who made those comments about a ceasefire in Lebanon, also saying that Western allies should not be arming Israel if arms and shipments are going to Gaza. Now, the 2 men, Benjamin Netanyahu and Emmanuel Macron, have just been speaking on the phone. Both the Elysee and Benjamin Netanyahu's office have both put out statements. Firstly, Doug, Emmanuel Macron saying that he gave his unwavering commitment to Israel's security. He also said that he showed solidarity, saying that the conviction, though, he also put to Mr. Netanyahu, a ceasefire, the time has now come. Flip that, reverse it from the Netanyahu office, saying this. He made clear, Mr. Netanyahu, this was the time to change the reality in the Middle East and bring stability.
These are 2 leaders who are never the twain shall meet when it comes to their worldviews. Whereas the Israelis do see, and you could say, beginning with the beeper and walkie-talkie attack on Hezbollah, that did perhaps severely degrade Hezbollah, and yes, create, you could say, from a military perspective, a window of opportunity to strike. You could say that window of opportunity is also a window of great danger. Because like I said, once you start those strikes, where do you stop? How far do you go?
No.
And what, you're opening up the doors.
How far do you go? Quick answer, get the job done. Stupid people, I'll tell you. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase that I have in my store. I take nattokinase every day now. It is fibroanalytic, so it'll break up clots, but it's great because it is synergistic with omega-3. It'll help to bring down your LDL levels and increase your HDL levels to improve your lipid profile, so you can improve your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get nattokinase. NAD+ is important to increase your energy levels, but it also helps to improve repair of your DNA. As we get older, our DNA does get damaged. We have repair mechanisms, but as we get older, we have more DNA damage, and it's hard for the body to heal itself and to repair that DNA damage. So it needs a little bit of help. Take the NAD+, it'll help to repair DNA. It helps to increase your energy levels, and it also helps for neural health. That's important, especially when you get older. You want to maintain your neural capacity, right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, to get the NAD+. Vitamin K2. This is a dual purpose product. This will help to improve your bones and your joints, right? Your ligaments, your tendons, but it also will help with cardiovascular health. It's synergistic with D3. Pay attention to the videos that I have talked about on how to reverse osteoarthritis and also how to reduce plaque. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin K2 and K7 that I offer. It's very important. I've been taking ubiquinol for many years. Many years. It's been part of my protocol, but now I can have it on my store so you can add it to your protocol. Ubiquinol is the active form for CoQ10. CoQ10, ubiquinol, what it does is it raises your energy levels. It's an antioxidant, so it's synergistic with C60, and it also helps with neural health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol.
But Emmanuel Macron, you could call it damage control, but I think Macron is actually he's speaking from conviction, and I think in his mind, he's speaking very honestly. I think the two are not mutually exclusive. I think Macron is in earnest when he says he supports the state of Israel. I think Macron genuinely does see himself as a staunch supporter of Israel, a staunch fighter of anti-Semitism and the hatred that is welled up on both sides, whether it's anti-Muslim or anti-Semitic hatred. I think he sees himself as really a sentinel in that battle, in that fight against all vestiges of hatred and prejudice. Yet at the same time, I think what he is doing is expressing his conviction that he doesn't see a way forward in the current Israeli strategy. So this is what I mean. Never the two worldviews shall meet. They're both hunkered down in their own very, very sharply drawn sides of perspectives, if you will. And there is nothing basically that is going to convince Netanyahu that what Emmanuel Macron is saying to him, that perhaps consider that ceasefire, consider what happens if you do go forward, if you drop this opportunity, the little opportunity that might remain right now to reach some sort of understanding, consider what might happen ahead. For right now, for Netanyahu and his military establishment, the ultimate objective is to take advantage of a moment when they say that they could perhaps, for not just now, but way into the future, ultimately provide security for Israel and the citizens of Israel, and to do it in a way where they will not have to face similar threats again. That's why they're so divergent on their perspectives. But I think that both men, if anything, are being honest to their convictions. I believe they really believe what they're doing and what they're saying.
Very interesting, Doug.
All right, so what I'd like to do is I wanted to talk about the oil. Now, there's lots of strife that's going on in the Middle East, and it's going to affect the oil. If Israel hits oil fields, there's going to be an emotional reaction where oil will skyrocket. That's my take on it. So let's see, what some of the talking heads on this subject matter have to say.
To build the website you need, with full business functionality and a design.
We should ask ourselves why are
climbing today and on pace for the biggest weekly gain in about 2 years, boosted by rising tensions in the Middle East. Joining us now, we want to bring in Claudio Galimberti. He is Rystad Energy's chief economist. Claudio, it's great to have you. So we've seen this massive move to the upside here. You see crude and Brent both pushing even further to the upside here today. I think the big question investors are asking, at least when it comes to crude, whether or not we're going to push above the $80 a barrel limit. What do you think?
Thank you for having me back. That's a distinct possibility. We are very close to that. And the tension in the Middle East is one of the highest level in 4 decades. Now, we should ask ourselves why iron price is higher to some extent. And that has to do with the fact that we have a lot of spare capacity in the Middle East. So we have come from basically 2 years of successive production cuts. And right now we have places like Saudi Arabia and UAE that sit on 4 or 5 million barrels of spare capacity. So that's keeping lithium prices. But there is an enormous amount of production taking place in the Middle East. So if we are going into an escalation phase, and if we are going into an all-out war, then the oil markets can really be on a tailspin upwards. So $80 per barrel is definitely something we can see the next few days.
It seems like the cap to that, Claudio, would be whether or not, as part of that escalation, there was any impact to the Strait of Hormuz. What should investors be watching for there to really understand what that might do to the price action if there was any escalation that specifically impacted that strait?
Absolutely, and it's good that you raise this point because I mean, in some cases, traders have started to buy call options at $100 per barrel strike price, which clearly shows that there is this possibility. So let me give you just a couple of important numbers. So we quoted the spare capacity in the Middle East. Let's call it more than 4 million barrels per day, between 4 and 7, depending on how you count it. Let's talk about the possible supply disruption from Iran. Iran is clearly one of the two parties in this war, and they currently export 2 million barrels per day. So if Iran was to be impacted, then this could be addressed with the spare capacity coming from Saudi Arabia and UAE. Strait of Hormuz is on a different league. We're talking about 13 to 50 million barrels per day of oil going through the Strait of Hormuz, and this is just crude. On top of that, we will need to add LNG, we will need to add oil products. So if the Strait of Hormuz, which has been patrolled by the US Navy for the past century, was to be impacted by the war, then all bets would be off because there's nothing that can then address
Okay, so
basically a block.
now you affect the oil and shipping. And do you think that the United States is going to be paid kind to that? Of course, they're going to start attacking Iran, right? And attacking Yemen to protect the shipping lanes. So this thing is all set up for huge conflict in the region. This is not just some simple, missile strike stuff. And when the United States gets involved, then we start breaking a bunch of stuff, right? Usually with bad strategic, planning, and we have a lot of mission creep that takes place after. But things could get really bad really quick. So before we continue on the oil going to $80 or maybe $100 a barrel, I think the ones that are putting call options in the 106, I don't think it'll go to 100 yet. I think it's lower probability, but they're doing the black swan event. Those call options are pretty cheap, so they're buying just in case of a black swan event. If a black swan event does happen, they could make a lot of money doing it, but they probably will lose. When you do these black swan option trades, most of the time you're losing money, but then there's that 1 or 2 time event that you make all your money back plus. So I would not suggest putting options out, going, way out of the money. I think $100 a barrel is a little bit out of reach. $85 a barrel, I think it's very reasonable. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get zeolite. Zeolite helps to detoxify your body. It takes heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals out of your body, including forever chemicals. So what's important here is to know that zeolite is a negatively charged molecule. It'll attach to a positively charged toxins and chemicals and heavy metals. That binding of the positive and negative will allow you to urinate that out in 6 to 8 hours. So you're slowly detoxifying your body. So you can take zeolite throughout the whole year, take a couple drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. You can do that year round each day. Some people prefer to just detoxify their body maybe once or twice a year. So for the ones that are just doing it once or twice a year, take a few drops underneath your tongue and swallow it with the filtered water and just use up the bottle. And then maybe do that once or twice a year. It's up to you. But the type of zeolite that I have, you can take year round. In addition, you can get forever chemicals out of your body. All right. You start by reducing the exposure. Most of the exposure with these toxins is through water and through the food we eat. So eat better food, stay away from processed foods, and make sure you filter your water. And then take zeolite to detoxify your body. And that way your body is getting healthier by detoxification. What will normally happen is that your endocrine system will get better and your immune system will get better, because these chemicals do affect our immune system and our endocrine system. They're endocrine disruptors. So please make sure that you detoxify your body. Go go to my store and get the zeolite. If you're on medication, talk to your doctor first, because zeolite might attach to the metabolism of your medication and lower your concentration levels. So your doctor might have to boost up your dosage for your medication while you're detoxifying your body. So please talk to your doctor first if you are on medication. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. This is a very good product, very high quality product that will detoxify your body, because we are surrounded by tons of chemicals. We got the chemtrails, we got the over pesticides on our foods. We have these toxins and these chemicals that are in our water and in our processed foods. So it's really important to detoxify it out. All right. And those forever chemicals, everyone is exposed to these things now. So it's important to detoxify. So please go to my store and get the zeolite. In addition, NAC is a great supplement. I take it every day. This will help to bring up your glutathione levels. Glutathione is a great antioxidant. It's synergistic with C60, right? Glutathione antioxidant pathway is a different pathway, but it'll soak up free radicals. That's really important for anti-aging and to help to boost up the immune system. In addition, NAC will help to maintain a better level and reduce anxiety, all right? And it helps to detoxify your liver and your kidney. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get NAC. NAC, raise up those glutathione levels so you can soak up those free radicals. And myotrol. Myotrol is extremely important to maintain muscle and to gain muscle, all right? This is important because when you get older, it's harder to maintain muscle mass, all right? So myotrol is a supplement you take to help to boost up muscle and to maintain muscle. It works really good when you're doing a little bit of cardiovascular and weight training, right? And you have a proper diet and you rest, and also myotrol helps to boost up the mitochondrial health. So this is synergistic with C60 because C60 helps to boost up the ATP and the mitochondrial health. So myotrol, you need a lot of mitochondria for your muscles. So, a lot of ATP for your muscles. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get myotrol to help to build muscle and to maintain muscle. This is extremely important as we get older. So please go to my store and get this very high quality product, myotrol.
Trade of almost 40 million barrels per day would be akin to more than 15% of crude production. So it would be completely unprecedented.
Claudio, I know it's very, very hard to predict, especially in a situation like this, but I guess just in terms of what you're forecasting, how likely is that?
That's indeed, that's extremely difficult to predict. We definitely are not in the business of predicting anything relating to military kind of escalation. But let's put it this way: if history is any guide, then very unlikely, right? So, as I said, for all the problems that we have seen in the Middle East for the past 80 years, the Strait of Hormuz has been working fine. And as I said, it's being patrolled by not just by U.S. Navy, but primarily. Clearly, we are facing, as I said at the beginning, a situation which is we have not seen in at least 40 years, I would say, and the possibility of of a direct war between Iran and the neighbors, specifically Israel, is at this point quite likely. So that is something that the traders are now starting to price in, right? So if you see really from, we are currently at $78 per barrel Brent, you see call options being bought at $100 per barrel. That's clearly factoring in something of a big size, big proportion, big, let's call it a big supply disruption.
Which of the refinery operations are most exposed, are most vulnerable here? Thinking about Exxon and Chevron, and where investors need to be monitoring this spillover effect here. that could impact how they're able to move their supply around?
Excellent point, because who is present in the Middle East? Well, they're primarily obviously talking about the big NOCs, right? So the ADNOC, the Saudi Aramco, the other big NOCs in the Middle East. But if you think about the major section, they have a relatively low exposure, specifically when it comes to oil. The Exxon is primarily present in the Americas, Chevron also in the Americas, and in West Africa. Shell is more evenly distributed across the globe, but it only has a relatively limited exposure to the Middle East. If you think about primarily in this case would be Qatar, the LNG. So Total similar, probably slightly more than the American counterparts, the exposure to the Middle East. But clearly the impact of a Middle East war would be on the Middle East producer, and the big majors have very, I wouldn't say very little exposure, but definitely they are much more exposed to other parts of the world, primarily America and West Africa. So from that standpoint, if you're an investor, purely from this standpoint, the major would stand to gain in a situation for a big supply disruption in the Middle East.
All right, Claudio Galimberti, who is the Rystad Energy Chief Economist. Claudio, thank you so much for taking the time here today. Appreciate it.
All right, so I think it's more like 80, 85, not 100. But, you know, that's something that has to be watched very carefully because there's lots of volatility. It can go up and down very quickly. And it doesn't lend itself to really analyzing it based on the structure of price. It's really about event risk. All right, so I'll keep you updated as the markets open and, you know, as the situation evolves. But I suspect that oil is probably going to be going up, not down anytime soon. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please follow me there. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get those supplements that I offer. You can get them individually, build up your own little protocol, or get the anti-aging boxes that I offer to get you started on what, you know, how to improve your immune system, how to improve your endocrine system, how to improve your cardiovascular system. It's really important. All right. If you follow what I'm doing, you are going to get healthier. All right. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.